The National Association of State Budget Officers was established in 1945. NASBO is the professional organization of budget officers in all of the 50 states as well as the territories. We've created a video series providing insight and information about state budgeting concepts. This State Budget Basics video is on the budget process. One of the first and most important things that people need to know is that budgets are built over the course of a 12-month period. And what's also important to know is that they're not based on a calendar year. They're based on what we call the fiscal year. The federal government fiscal year begins on October 1st, but state budgets in almost every case begin their fiscal year on July 1st. There are some exceptions though. For October 1st, it's Michigan and Alabama. September 1st is Texas, and April 1st is the beginning of the fiscal year for New York. While most states budget for a year, just like the federal government does, there are many states that budget for a 2-year period. And obviously it makes a big difference if you're allocating your resources through the budget for 1 year or for an actual 2-year period. The 2-year budgeting process is called the biennial budget. And in the case of those that do it on an annual, yearly basis, it's called the annual budget. The first part of the budget development process is called the agency budget preparation process. This is when the State Budget Office provides instructions to the agencies and asks them to provide requests as to how much they want to spend in the budget. And this is an information gathering process. They basically ask how the agencies would like to spend money in the future, what additional funds they might need, and also are there areas that don't need money to be spent any further. Let's say that the State Parks Department is sending their request in. They might put something in the budget information in which they say that most of the vehicles in state parks are 20 years old and they need new vehicles. So they may request several million additional dollars so that they can purchase additional vehicles. The next step is review and recommendation. In this step, the Budget Department, as well as cabinet secretaries and other officials in state government, make recommendations to the governor as to what spending should occur in the governor's next budget. In good times, this might be allocating additional resources and increasing the budgets of certain parts of state government. But in bad times, this might actually be cutting and determining where to cut and by how much. I can say as a former state budget officer, I remember the days when you would get in the conference room with the governor and the aides to the governor and make the final tough decisions as to what ultimately should be in the budget. So the governor's decisions have been revealed with great fanfare, either through press conferences or major speeches. And the governor's actually presented the entire budget to the state legislature. The legislative process for considering the budget begins. This is called the appropriations process. During this legislative process of appropriations, the House and the Senate pass their own versions of the budget. Following this process, the budget has to be reconciled so they can determine what will be the ultimate final piece of legislation that's passed. Once the whole process is completed as far as appropriations are concerned, a final budget is passed by both houses of the legislature, and then the budget goes back to the governor who originally proposed the budget in the first place. The governor in the states often has the power to either veto parts or line items of the actual budget. And when the governor finishes that process, the budget actually goes back again to the legislature. And they can determine whether or not they want to override some or all of the governor's vetoes of portions of the budget. The final part of this entire budget process, which has gone on for months, is now the budget execution process. This is when the budget is implemented and agencies are told what amounts they can actually spend and what they can spend the money on. For example, that State Parks Department, if they received additional funds to buy more vehicles, the Budget Department gives them the authority to spend the money and buy the additional vehicles. And in the cases of other agencies and departments during this execution phase, the budget decisions are made in which the money is actually spent. And of course, it's spent on personnel, it's spent on equipment, and it's spent on services. Throughout the process, citizens have the opportunity to make their voice heard as how they want money spent. They can work through advocacy groups or communicate with their legislators, the governor, other elected officials as to how they would like to see resources allocated in the state. And frankly, even though most of the attention to the budget process is when the budget's released by the governor and when the legislature is considering it, really all 12 months of the year, citizens should be encouraged to let elected officials know how they want their resources to be allocated. As you can see, what's important about the budget process is there are numerous parts to it, which allows many different individuals to be involved in the development and the determination as to how money within a state is spent. So that's a quick overview of the state budgeting process.